We're live, all right. All right, never done this before in my life. Don't think any here right now, but that's okay. I'm not surprised. So yeah, because didn't get around to reviewing the final two episodes of season 5 of Better Call Saul before the premiere of season 6 tomorrow. So for this video, we're gonna review the ninth episode of season 5 of Better Call Saul, entitled "Bad Choice Road." So I don't think anyone's here right now. Maybe one person is. Don't know what the hell I'm doing. Never done this before. Kind of a warm up for tomorrow, I guess, for sure. So, all right. Well, I feel like most people are just gonna watch this afterwards anyway. So let's get right into it. All right. So cold opening scene of episode 9 picks up where the previous episode left off, with the continuation of Jimmy and Mike walking through the desert, following them, incapacitating the final henchman who followed them dramatically at the end of the previous episode. And anyway, getting right into it, this scene, this opening scene right here, is a split screen effect between Jimmy McGill and Kim Wexler, sort of going about their days, kind of. How do we do this here? There must be a better way to do this. There's got to be a better way to do this. Maybe this. I don't know. Yeah, that's probably better. All right. Well, anyway, again, it's so weird doing these lives. I'm so used to just editing them afterwards. But anyway, getting first opening scene, we see a split screen between Jimmy and Kim going about their days. Kim most likely after returning from seeing Lalo and not getting any information from her. Jimmy continuing to walk in the desert with Mike. We see the sort of, juxtaposition of their days, Jimmy having to drink his own urine, with Kim being able to, drink out of the, faucet. We see the sort of, back and forth between them. It's definitely a callback to season 4 of Better Call Saul, and the episode entitled Something Stupid. But what's interesting about this one is it cuts so abruptly here. After them sort of going back and forth, you see the montage happening, and you think it's going to go on much longer, but then it ends very abruptly when Jimmy crosses the threshold and we see him having service, and this basically makes him able to call Kim Wexler to sort of tell him, damn, I am terrible at doing these live, to sort of tell him that she's okay. That's pretty much where we see the opening scene of this episode, and we see just Kim being absolutely overcome with emotion with after he's receiving the phone call from Jimmy, after thinking that he was absolutely dead. It's pretty crazy here. It definitely foreshadows where Kim's head is and where her thinking is throughout the rest of this episode. But yeah, pretty much just we see Jimmy, he's okay, he's going to be able to survive. He gets in contact with Kim, and that's pretty much the cold opening scene of episode 9. Then, following this, the episode then picks up with Jimmy and Mike at the truck stop. We see them just sort of collecting themselves, absolutely overcome with exhaustion from having to walk in the desert. Oh, whoops. Got the music going there. Absolutely overcome with exhaustion from walking in the desert. This is abruptly interrupted by Tyrus and Victor picking them up. Again, it's hard to go into all the specific details here, but basically we find out that they're okay here. They're going to keep going, trying to basically totally exhausted. They're getting picked up. Victor and Tyrus sort of basically tell them the laydown of what happened with the people who ambushed them. They said that no one has gone down that road from the time of the gunfight. Everything's still there, including the Rex's steam. Victor assuring them that they're going to be able to go down and clean it up like it never happened. But of course, Victor tells them that the guy who followed them, he's in the middle of absolutely nowhere. It'll be pretty damn, lucky if they find him. Mike saying, it's really not a problem because he's in the middle of nowhere. So, it is what it is. Following this, we see Jimmy just overcome with exhaustion because, he hadn't slept in friggin' 2 days. And before, he starts dozing off, Mike tells him, don't fall asleep yet. We have to go over your story. Thus, really sort of just reminding us that this whole thing has to be kept from Lalo, and this is all part of Gus's long, elaborate plan against the cartel here. So, following following this statement by Mike, we then see a continuation of Jimmy taking the $7 million to MDC. Great scene here. They previewed it, I remember, a couple of years ago before the episode, but we basically see him walking into the bail bonds, and we see him saying to Guzman, Jorge, insinuating that he wants to bail out his client. The person working behind the window says $7 million, just totally taken aback by, you're joking, right? Cash bond. You have $7 million in cash you're going to put up right now. And so basically he says, yep. And he puts the $7 million on the counter. Pretty great scene here. Pretty cool to see. This is then followed by them counting the money. It's then followed by the district attorney just walking in with a couple other of her associates, just absolutely taken aback by just the sheer amount of money. I mean, we forget that this is a period piece and it takes place in 2004. So $7 million back in 2004, way more than even now in 2022. So it's a crazy amount of money. But anyway, so she basically says to Saul, $7 million, your client has $7 million, where did it come from? Jimmy, of course, playing dumb here, saying it's not his job to say where the money of his client comes from. She's basically saying, who exactly is your client? He says, Jorge de Guzman. So basically, after they count the bail, the woman working behind the counter says that the extra $100,000 is extra. So Jimmy, it's of course the $100,000 vig that Lalo paid for Jimmy to pick up the bail. And then he says, and Mr. de Guzman. So following this, we then see Lalo leaving MDC very cool and casually, as Lalo is, pretty great to see. We then see Lalo come out to Jimmy and say, you must have a story. And then, of course, Jimmy proceeds to tell him the fake story that Mike told him to say to hide the ambush, of course, because Gus, of course, doesn't want Lalo to know what's happening here, and how it's eventually revealed to us how Juan Bolsa sort of orchestrated this whole thing, and how he doesn't want. Well, anyway, we'll get to it when we get to it. But anyway, Jimmy tells Lalo the story. Lalo sort of takes it at face value here. Again, right as Nacho pulls up, he says, all right, amigo of the cartel, we're going to do big things together. Of course, before Lalo gets into the car, much to Jimmy's surprise, he says, make sure to buy something for the abuela. She's a looker. Jimmy absolutely taken aback, sort of playing dumb initially, but then saying, why what? And then, of course, Lalo telling Saul the story about how Kim came to visit him at MDC. Of course, Saul absolutely taken aback here. Can't believe that, Kim would have went through those lengths to go, try to figure out what was happening. And basically that ends that second scene here in Act 1. Then following Jimmy being absolutely unsettled by the story, we then see Jimmy return to the apartment where Kim tends to him. He's absolutely sunburned. I mean, you can just see the sort of the rash on his traps from carrying those 75, 80-pound bags in the desert for a day and a half. He's absolutely trashed. Kim saying that has to go to a hospital. Of course, Saul not wanting to do that. Probably not a good idea to go to a hospital when you're sort of doing cartel things there. It would be pretty hard to tell a fake story as why you're that sunburned and like where these sort of rashes came from. So anyway, he says that he's fine. He just needs to rest. Kim draws an oatmeal bath for him, try to tend to him, take care of him. And of course, while they're doing this, Jimmy confronts Kim about seeing Lalo, basically saying like, you saw Lalo, like you can't do this. And Kim basically saying, no, it was safe. It was fine. There were police officers everywhere. I was in MDC. It was the safest place in the world. Jimmy saying, you don't see Lalo, I see Lalo, at this point, absolutely wanting to protect Kim, definitely probably thinking about that story that Mike told him in the desert about Kim being in the game, and, him not wanting Kim to be in the game, wanting to absolutely protect her, having this very protective nature, for Kim, which is pretty crazy with the benefit of hindsight, kind of seeing where this, storyline of Kim is going to go. With everything that's been teased to us prior to the season 6 premiere tomorrow, as we got the ambulance going on in the background there. But anyway, after, Saul telling Kim the story, she then asked the ultimate question of, was it worth it? Was all this worth it? Being lost in the desert, this excruciating sunburn, was it worth it? And then he basically tells Kim, go in the bag and look. That's what it was all about. It's about right there. And of course, She initially goes for the bag and sees the $100,000. Saul basically saying it's all about the money. This is what it's for. This is what it's all about. Of course, unbeknownst to Saul, aka Jimmy, always messed those up. But unbeknownst to him at the time, Kim also discovers the thermos of the world's second best lawyer that had the bullet hole through it. Her dramatically looking at it, just unbelievably perplexed at what she's looking at. Doesn't tell Jimmy, of course, and then returns it to the bag. So again, like with the benefit of hindsight, what I thought this symbolized and what I thought this scene meant for Kim Wexler, at least initially, seems pretty different from where it's going, at least to where it went at the end of season 5 of Better Call Saul and what has been previewed for Kim Wexler heading into season 6. So again, pretty cool opening scene here. Opening act, excuse me. And this scene here where Kim returns the thermos to the bag, thus ends Act 1. So let's see here. Again, so weird doing these live compared to editing these in hindsight post. So, all right. Well, anyway, all right. So Act 2 after this, this then picks up at Los Pueblos Hermanos, where Mike informs Gus about what happened in the desert. Mike tells him about everything that happened, and also tells Gus about the Colombian gang that he believes ambushed them, because back when he was a police officer, he did a job back east where he noticed the same tattoo that the gang members had. He drew it on a piece of paper for him. Then, Mike kind of asks Gus, do we know who did this? Do we know who tried to ambush us? Gus says he knows who does it, he knows who did it. This then cuts to a scene of Juan Bolsa at his estate in Mexico. We then see, I believe Gus phoned him. Gus called Bolsa to just try to figure out what was going on. He basically tells Bolsa the good news, quote unquote. Of course, playing the game here that their man Lalo has been released from U.S. custody at a very high cost, but he's free. Juan Bolsa says that this is great news. He hopes that all of Gus Fring's bad luck will no longer continue. Gus sort of playing dumb here initially, saying bad luck. And then, of course, Juan Bolsa recalls, everything that had happened to Gus over the course of this season. His dealers getting picked up, the DEA, the fires at Los Pueblos Hermanos. He says, hopefully all this bad luck will end. And Gus then assures him that, the coming months will be their best yet. Juan Bolsa says, all right, that's great, pretty much. So then, following hanging up the phone, Gus then tells Mike that he knows who tried to ambush Saul in the desert. And at the time, I was a little bit confused even when watching this, but after watching it a couple of times, so it appears what happened here is that, Juan Bolsa is not a fan of Lalo trying to undermine the cartel here. And he wanted Lalo to stay in jail so he wouldn't be able to, work against Gus. And he knew that he and, by Hector pulling the strings, was working against Gus Fring. And thus, by Lalo staying in jail, this helps Gus and thus helps Juan Bolsa and the cartel. So that's basically what Gus tells Mike here, that he was protecting Gus's interests in order to protect his own interests. That's why he ordered this attack on Jimmy, sort of keep Lalo in jail. I believe that's what the story is here. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that's what they were going for here when Juan Bolsa and Gus had this conversation. So after this, Gus tells Mike he just spoke to the man who ordered the hit. Mike asked him if this is a person we need to worry about. Gus assures him that. Gus basically tells him the story that I just told here, and it sort of explains why he did what he did. And then Gus also says to Mike that going forward, of course, their actions against the cartel must be unimpeachable, in respect to the entire storyline that's going to ensue with Gus's actions against the cartel, which, of course, will eventually culminate in Breaking Bad, but which we'll also see, displayed to us in season 6 of Better Call Saul, of course. And then following this reassurance by Gus and Mike, sort of, understanding where the situation stands, this is then followed by a scene that I've talked about in a couple of my previous videos, where Mike then says there's one more thing he wants to talk about, and that is Nacho Varga wanting out of the cartel. Again, I've talked about this scene a lot, so I don't want to go on too long about it, but basically saying he did everything we asked. He wants out. Gus assuring him, why would we give up a good asset like Nacho Varga? You know, I see no reason to do this. Mike then sort of, begins to draw on the sort of emotional sympathy he has for Nacho, basically saying that he has a gun to his father's head. It doesn't sit well with him. He doesn't believe fear is an effective motivator. Again, a callback to Breaking Bad. Again, I could go off on like a 20-minute tangent on that. The fear not being an effective motivator that was first revealed to us in season 3 of Breaking Bad in the episode entitled Green Light, where Mike told Gus, why don't you just tell Walter White that he has an axe to his head, if you want to get him to work for you, when Walt initially refused to work for him before he started working in the super lab. Again, that's a whole video right there. But anyway, Gus basically then goes on to say that a dog that bites every owner he's had can only be disciplined with a firm hand or put down. And that pretty much ends this scene here. Again, it's a pretty interesting sort of back and forth here where, I've definitely seen the memes online about how Gus said he doesn't believe fear is an effective motivator in season 3 of Breaking Bad. But then the very next season, he threatens to kill Walter White's entire family. But I think what they're getting at here is if you really want investment with someone initially, then fear is not the best motivator. And it probably isn't, because once he threatened Walter White like that, it basically led to his death. So I guess, having someone not be afraid if you really want long-term investment, I guess in hindsight, Gus realized that was true. And who knows, maybe something that happens with Nacho Varga next season will make Gus realize that even more. I'm not really sure, but yeah, that pretty much sums up that scene there. Let's see. So, after this, the scene then cuts to Nacho at his home, talking with, I believe, Tyrus, basically saying, everything's done. Lalo's going to head down to Mexico. He's going to talk to Hector at Casa Tranquila tomorrow, say his goodbyes, and then asking Tyrus, all right, so I did everything. He's going back to Mexico. We're done, right? It's over for me. And then Tyrus just basically tells him, just do what you're told. So, again, Nacho obviously realizing he's between a rock and a hard place here. He's not going to get out of the cartel. He's just basically doing what he's told here. And at this point, it's looking like Lalo's going to be heading down to Mexico, but quite the twist of fate that will ensue, of course, later in this episode. So then following this, the next scene in this episode then picks up the following morning, where Kim is fixing breakfast for Jimmy while Jimmy just sleeps in and wakes up. Definitely a callback, I feel, to the final episode of season 3 of Better Call Saul entitled Lantern, where I believe it was that one, where Kim had the car accident and Jimmy was sort of taking care of her. Now we sort of see the roles reversed. But anyway, following Jimmy getting up and basically saying that, Kim doesn't need to take care of him. He can take care of himself. He's fine. She doesn't have to do all this. This is then followed by Kim basically saying she already called in sick, so he's stuck with her. So basically, again, I don't want to get too bogged down to every little detail that happens initially in this scene, but basically this scene is basically meant to display to us that Jimmy is clearly experiencing what appears to be post-traumatic stress disorder. Again, I'm no psychiatrist or therapist or anything like that, but again, we can definitely see where Kim is, making the freshly squeezed orange juice. Just the sound and the gratingness is definitely causing some great agitation for, Saul here. So I definitely think that's the point here for, us to be shown that Jimmy's experiencing some real PTSD. And it definitely reminds me of season 1 of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Mijo, I believe, where following the ordeal with Tugo breaking the skateboarder's legs and Jimmy's on the date, we can see the man breaking the breadsticks, and this also is causing Jimmy great amount of agitation. So it's kind of a callback to that, I think, as well. And it's definitely just a reminder that Jimmy McGill, despite all of his sort of criminality, he's definitely never experienced violence to this level before his entire life. So again, definitely feeling incredibly restless, once the orange juice kind of is there's sort of a malfunction with the machine where it spills all over Kim. This then causes Jimmy to break his bowl, basically saying he's not ready for this yet. Kind of basically displaying to Kim that, the story that, everything was fine about how he just wandered in the desert on his own clearly wasn't true. how, something definitely happened. She saw the bullet hole, so it's definitely kind of foreshadowing that. But basically, after this, they're then sort of, taking the day off because, Jimmy is clearly injured and Kim called in sick. So they're just watching TV together, sort of just, watching television, relaxing. Again, Jimmy definitely doesn't seem very much into it. He definitely doesn't seem in the moment. His head definitely seems somewhere else here when we're watching this scene. This is then interrupted by a phone call here where he initially says that he's busy, he can't take anything, it can't be today. Of course, he's then persuaded from an unknown conversation. And then he says, all right, I'll be there in 45 minutes. Of course, Kim saying, what are you doing? You can't even walk. Jimmy then saying that one of his clients called and basically said they're trying to, undo his plea deal, saying he's down there right away. Kim, of course, saying like, you can't be doing this. You're clearly hurt. Jimmy never minds, ignores that, keeps pressing. Then following, Jimmy going to get ready and leave, Kim says that she knows that he's lying about what happened in the desert, how something definitely happened, that, he is hiding something from her, then following a sort of long pause here where you think maybe is Jimmy going to come clean? Of course he doesn't. And he sort of, again, tells a very much half truth here where he says that, while he was lost in the desert, he had to drink his own pee to survive. That's the thing that happened. So it's causing him sort of great stress, insisting that he's totally fine and that he doesn't want to talk about it anymore with her. Of course, absolutely not true. He's definitely, I don't know what he's doing here. He's definitely probably putting on some sort of, I don't know, basically sort of show of stoic strength, I suppose, not wanting to seem vulnerable maybe in front of his girlfriend. So, just pretty interesting scene here. So, yeah, so, okay, so following this final scene in Act 2, then, of course, with Kim only calling in sick because, she wanted to stay with Jimmy. Following Jimmy going to work, she decides to go to work as well. She then returns to Schweigert and Coakley. And this is actually a really great scene here. This is a really sort of underrated scene, in my opinion, the very last scene of Act 2, where Kim basically returns to work, basically saying that she wants to, go about, doing everything that needs to get done. And, while she was gone, her assistant basically says that everything was taken care of. There were no issues, and so Kim can just kind of move on to the next thing here. And we sort of see her just go about the sort of corporate attorney sort of, deal here. And then she's definitely in the middle of just sort of doing very, very bureaucratic work for, banking law and regulatory law, not the most exciting stuff. We then see her, sort of, have a moment of sort of introspection here where she sort of looks out into her office of like all the awards she'd seen. And then this is abruptly interrupted with her having a conversation with Rich Schweiger that occurs off camera. We see them talking, but we don't hear the audio, but it's absolutely implied here by Kim's actions that she abruptly quit Schweigert and Coakley, telling her assistant as much that, she basically quit, that she's not going to work anymore for Schweigert and Coakley. Of course, much to her assistant's surprise, she then sort of, goes back to her office, sort of not really wanting to take anything, none of the sort of awards she earned or anything like that. The only thing she takes, of course, is the top of the Xavier Añejo tequila bottle and walks out of her office, and thus ending Act 2 of this episode. And again, it's kind of like Kim's sort of thinking here is sort of revealed over the course of the next 2 episodes about how really, this whole ordeal, again, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but just like everything she went through in the desert here, where she just sort of realizes that, this what she's doing, there's really no meaning for her in this sort of corporate law here for Kim. That's sort of the whole point of this scene. It's definitely foreshadowing where, Kim Wexler's story is going to go, in season 6 of Better Call Saul. So definitely, I feel like I didn't really do it justice describing it here, but just a very good foreshadowing scene of where Kim Wexler's head is and where we see her go. And of course, she articulates all of this over the course of this episode. All right. So what are we doing here? All right. All right, so Act 3, moving along here. This then picks up at Casa Tranquila. We see Lalo and Hector talking about how the fact that he has to go down to Mexico because, of course, he has to skip bail because he's dead to rights, basically guilty. If he stays, he's going to go to jail. He has to go down to Mexico until the heat dies down, basically saying that Tuchel will take over. He knows that he's a hothead, but when he's on the stuff, but he assures Hector that he'll be fine. Someone will look after him. There'll be plenty of moves to make against Gus Fring when he's down south. He'll have Don Eladio's ear. He'll be able to convince him. They'll be able to move against Gus Fring, and eventually whatever is Gus's will be theirs. Of course, this has been the long sort of game that Lalo and Hector have been playing together over the course of this season. This is then finally ended by Lalo saying to Hector that Familia es todo, again, another callback to season 3 of Breaking Bad in the episode entitled 1 Minute, the cold opening scene of that episode where Hector shows Marco and Leonel, his nephews, the fact that family is everything and how you don't want your brother to be dead. Again, it's definitely a callback to that scene. So, and what's pretty interesting here is as we see Lalo, leaving Hector at Casa Tranquila, we just see him sort of, really just almost have this sort of sympathy for him, where we just see him obviously, not wanting to be there at all at this, very, I don't even know the word, just very almost sort of corny, sort of assisted a living facility. And I've definitely surmised in some of my previous videos how when we first met Hector Salamanca, he was living in the country in that house when Tuco kidnapped Walt and Jesse. So I do wonder if we're going to see the creators display to us, the sort of backstory about how we ended up in that house. I wonder if that's the look that Lalo gave Hector at the end, the very last time he saw him, if that is what they're sort of implying here, that, they got to get him out of this, place, it's absolutely terrible. So, anyway, following this, we then see Lalo return to Nacho to tell him, all right, we're going to drive to the border. It's, of course, also revealed to us in this scene that Victor has been spying on them the entire time as the two drive away. So, again, definitely a setup scene here for the first scene in Act 3. Then following this, the next scene in this episode then picks up at the courthouse where Jimmy loses a case to Deputy Director Bill Oakley here, who, gloats about his victory, really giving Jimmy the business here. Basically, again, I can't do his justice here, basically just sort of, saying a lot of comedic lines here. But the thing I find most interesting about this scene is that because Saul Goodman's storyline, aka Jimmy McGill's, is getting so much more emotionally deep and complex, he is no longer the comic relief of this series, which is pretty crazy because when we first met Saul Goodman in Breaking Bad, he was the comic relief to cut through the dark nature of the show of Walter White. So basically, I mean, one-liner after one-liner after one-liner with Saul Goodman, and it's pretty crazy how they're crafting an entire backstory series, basically based on throwaway dialogue of Saul Goodman that was meant to be comedic. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible in hindsight to me. And it's weird how this scene kind of reminds me of that, how we're really having Bill Oakley be the humor here in this scene, because Jimmy, aka Saul, that's not really his job anymore. I mean, it's his job to have a very deep, emotional, complex backstory. That's the whole premise of the series. But anyway, following, Jimmy collecting himself, we then see him, outside of the courthouse, and we see him get into a car with Mike Ehrmantraut. Now, this scene here, I mean, oh my goodness, I've watched this scene over and over again. This is just an unbelievably powerful scene. Again, I've talked about it quite a bit in some of my previous videos, so I don't know how in-depth I'm going to get into it here, but basically Jimmy, asks Mike, you said this goes away. Can I get a time frame on that? Mike basically saying how it's different for every person, Saul then saying, what about me? And then Mike goes into the whole spiel about how, basically one day you're going to be going about your business, brushing your teeth, eating your breakfast, going about your daily life. And then you're going to realize you never thought about it, any of it. And again, without getting into every single, detail in the scene, like the whole point here is that, you can't forget, despite what you're going through right now, it's possible to forget and it's possible to move on, which I definitely think is quite allegorical in terms of, where Jimmy McGill is right now compared to where he's going to be in the plot of Breaking Bad. Just someone who is, I mean, I believe he's in love with Kim Wexler. I mean, it's hard to define what love is, but he definitely seems incredibly just emotionally attached to Kim Wexler compared to who he is in the plot of Breaking Bad, having sex with prostitutes and seemingly no longer in a relationship with her. So again, definitely a pretty deep piece of foreshadowing here, in my opinion. I may be wrong, but that's definitely what it seems like to me. The scene then goes on, for Mike to go on his bad choice road speech. Again, I can't do it justice reciting it. I've talked about it in a lot of my previous videos too, basically saying how, it was them or us, they were in the game. Saul then, of course, says, "What about Fred? Was he in the game?" Mike saying, "No, there was a lot wrong with what happened with that." And again, I've talked about this as well, about how we really see that Saul has quite the emotional sort of, he just has a lot of emotions in respect to the death of Fred. But when we saw him in the plot of Breaking Bad, I mean, there were tons of people who died in his circle. I mean, I don't know if he felt this way about someone like Drew Sharp, who was shot by Todd Alquist, who definitely was killed as collateral damage from what they were for, in respect to what they were doing in the plot of Breaking Bad. I mean, when I think about the death of Combo, I definitely, maybe he just sort of rationalizes it as Combo was in the game. But with someone like Drew Sharp, you definitely don't see that emotion from Saul Goodman, at least on screen. But again, who knows? I mean, like we said, we never saw Saul Goodman in the plot of Breaking Bad. And I definitely think Peter Gould teased, I read it somewhere on Reddit, how we're going to see Saul Goodman home alone away from the office. So who knows? Maybe the person he is at home is completely different from the person who seems to have absolutely no sympathy and is absolutely perfectly okay with killing to serve his own interests, even if he's not the one pulling the trigger. So again, pretty emotionally deep speech here by Mike. Again, I can't do it justice. I've seen it a lot of times, but that bad choice road is speech is something right there about how we can't change the past. Our decisions. Our decisions are our decisions, and there's really nothing that can be done about that. So again, pretty dramatic scene here, in my opinion, for sure. And then following this, the last scene in this act then picks up at the Mexican border, where Nacho drives Lalo to the meeting spot, the same place that he told Saul to go to pick up the money. Of course, prior to Lalo getting picked up by the cousins, he then sort of has this moment of realization, sort of thinking about the story that Saul told him outside of MDC. And then this then proceeds to display to us Lalo get back into the car and tell Nacho to drive back a couple miles, sort of reciting the story about how Saul said that his car broke down a couple miles from the pickup site, sort of saying, if it broke down, where is it? Of course, they then drive back, and eventually in a ravine, Lalo tells Nacho to stop right near it, and he sees that Saul's car is in a ditch. He jumps down very dramatically. Quite the scene there. We then see him look over the bullet holes in the car, of course, realizing that, at least him believing that the story that Saul told him was not true, because he mentioned nothing about bullets or nothing about, his car being shot. So following Lalo seeing this, he then gets back in the car and tells Nacho to drive back to Albuquerque. Nacho saying, "What about the cousins? What about Marco and Lionel?" Saying, "What about them? I'll give them a message." And then Nacho drives them back to Albuquerque, thus setting up the confrontation that is going to ensue at the very end of this episode. And then following this, the very last act in this episode, which if I believe is correct, is one long scene here. It's one long scene, I believe, where Kim returns home to following her quitting Schweigart and Coakley. We see Jimmy there sort of resting, basically after Jimmy wakes up, Kim sort of talks to him, basically saying that she had news, but the news can wait, sort of seeing that Jimmy is very tired dealing with, what he went through in the desert, clearly still exhausted completely. But then, of course, following some pressing here by Saul saying, what is it? Is it good news? Kim then tells Saul that she quit Schweigart and Coakley. This, of course, is much to Jimmy's surprise here, sort of not understanding what she's doing, sort of basically telling her that, go back to Rich, say you were basically mulling it over, sort of, you're still taking your time here with this decision. Kim basically saying it's already done. I've already decided to quit. Saul basically not understanding this at all. Like, what are you going to do for money? Like, He understands, maybe not wanting to work at Schweigert and Coakley, having to deal with all the bureaucracy of working in a corporate law firm, but you can't give up Mesa Verde too, which is what Kim also said about how she doesn't care about Mesa Verde, in that sense that, it's not doing any real good in the society. What is it? It's corporate law. It's very, for lack of a better term, maybe Kim finds this sort of solace. She says she wants to be just a pro bono attorney and help real people. Saul basically saying, all right, that's all fine and dandy, to have be idealistic like that and be this utopian ideal, but pro bono means no money. What are you going to do for money? And Kim basically, Saul keeps pressing and pressing here, basically going to tell a sort of abbreviated hybrid version of the bad choice road story that Mike told to him, basically saying how this is a bad choice road for Kim. Kim then pushing back even further, basically saying that she didn't understand when he wanted to be Saul Goodman, but she was supportive, and basically saying that he should do the same for her. This conversation is, of course, constantly interrupted by Saul getting phone calls, but of course, always sending them to voicemail, continuing to press. Eventually, this conversation is then interrupted by a knock on the door. Following Kim going to answer the door, we then see Saul finally answer the phone that he's following him getting phone calls over and over and over again. It's then revealed to us that Mike is on the phone saying, put your phone down somewhere where I can hear it. We can see him absolutely hauling ass in a car, clearly trying to get to Jimmy and Kim's apartment. It's then revealed to us that the reason why Mike wanted Saul to put his phone down is because none other than Lalo Salamanca is at the door. So this thus sets up the long, dramatic confrontation that ensues here in this scene. And again, we see Lalo, of course, saying to Kim, I told you he'd be back. Saul saying, Lalo, I'm assured that you would be enjoying your freedom now down south. And of course, he says, I had some business to attend to. We then see Lalo sit down and, display to us that he has a firearm tucked in his waistband. Of course, they then sit down, Saul trying to protect Kim here, saying, they can talk, but Kim was just stepping out. Saul, of course, excuse me, Lalo, of course, saying she can stay. She's a part of the legal team. Definitely a callback to the last episode where, she showed up at NDC. Okay, so basically this scene here is just, again, it's hard to do it justice. The scene is so damn dramatic. But anyway, it's basically Lalo tells Saul to tell him the story of what happened at the border with the money. Saul then proceeds to tell the story that he and Mike concocted in the car on the way back. Of course, following him telling the story, Lalo then says, tell it again, very dramatic pause here. Saul tells the story again and again. Lalo basically saying, tell me again, just saying he wants the real story. Again, following Saul basically sort of fumbling through his words here, sort of, being very sort of almost scared here, definitely just exuding just absolute fear, saying he doesn't know what he's getting at here. Of this eventually interrupted by Kim Wexler, taking the lead here and basically saying, what are you getting at? What are you getting at here? And then Lalo reveals that he found, Saul's car. He found the bullet holes, saying, did you push it in a ditch? What happened? You're basically saying something happened here. I want the full story. And then, of course, this then leads to us seeing Kim Wexler telling Lalo with exuding just absolute confidence here that, this is New Mexico. This is the West. You don't think that, someone just shot up this car. They saw this abandoned car and just shot it up and pushed it into a ravine. You leave a soda can on the side of the road, it's going to be completely shot up. So basically, Kim gives Lalo this long berating speech here, basically saying that Saul did all of this for you. And the reason why you had him do this is because you don't trust anyone else in your organization. And basically saying, if you can't trust Saul Goodman, if you can't trust anyone except Saul Goodman, you have bigger problems, basically. Again, I'm definitely not doing it justice here. You definitely need to just go back and watch Kim give this speech here. But long story long, this speech here, this pressing by Kim Wexler then leads to Lalo Salamanca exiting the apartment, getting back in the car with Nacho and basically saying, to drive back to Mexico, but of course implying that they're not going back with Marco and Leonel, how they're just going to just drive somewhere else at this point in time. That's what it seems at the end of this episode. but yeah, here without having to go too much in the specific details of what happened in this scene here. I mean, when I just going back to when Kim visited Lalo at MDC, I really believe that, like, as Vince Gilligan said, that you rarely see Kim Wexler make a decision that's really bad. I mean, Kim Wexler is definitely a very intelligent and calculated character, but after watching this scene here, I really and really after watching season 5 of Better Call Saul, we really didn't see any of these long-term ramifications. I feel really come into effect for Kim Wexler, at least not as the result of season 5 of Better Call Saul. So even her going to visit Lalo, and Lalo finding out that she's the wife of Saul Goodman. I really feel like the chickens haven't come home to roost for Kim. And I was even thinking about, if Kim didn't even go to MDC in the first place and she just waited it out, it's likely that Saul would have still told Lalo that story, and Lalo still would have went to Saul's apartment. So he would have known that Kim Wexler existed anyway, but maybe Saul would say this is just a coworker, or just a person or a neighbor or something to that effect. Maybe he wouldn't have known that it's Saul's wife. But I really feel like maybe this has to play a sort of larger role in the story. I'm not really sure, but yeah, definitely sort of paints Kim Wexler as a total badass here for sure. And I'm not surprised with this at all. I mean, definitely, maybe I was thinking too sort of, I don't even know the word, but I definitely, you knew that the characters weren't going to sort of paint Kim Wexler as this sort of two-dimensional sort of rom-com damsel or anything like that. I mean, this is an incredibly complex character here in Kim Wexler, and this scene, and definitely the next episode as well, definitely displays that to us for sure. So again, pretty awesome episode here for sure. Yeah, really enjoyed, a great continuation of my favorite episode. Bagman, I definitely slipped my mind there. Bagman, absolutely, without a doubt, my favorite episode of the season. But this is a great continuation here, and definitely a great setup episode for the final episode of season 5 of Better Call Saul. So, yeah, not really sure how that went. This is definitely kind of a warm up for tomorrow. I've never been live before ever, so yeah, it was. I don't know. I don't know what to think, but yeah, it is what it is. Definitely different than editing it in post. So I guess I can go over some of these comments, I guess. Thanks for the super chat, Horizon. I appreciate it. I like the emoji. Damn, I appreciate it. That's right on. Really appreciate that. Thank you. So yeah, maybe Kubi gives Ed's number to Saul. I definitely hope we see Kubi. That's for damn sure. I mean, this has nothing to do with anything right now, but we got to see Bill Burr. I know he has like the biggest Q rating of anyone in the Better Call Saul universe, it seems right now, but I really hope we see it. So, all right. Anyway, so yeah, I'm probably gonna end it here. I may do another stream at some point to review the final episode of season 5 of Better Call Saul before tomorrow. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone who tuned in. This is definitely good. Definitely gotta warm up here. Didn't want to go into it completely cold turkey with never having done this before. So yeah, I'm gonna end it here, and maybe I'll review the other stream tonight, or maybe tomorrow. We'll see. So yeah, thanks for watching. Really appreciate it.